AI is everywhere. I know I use it probably daily for estimating prices, comparing products or services, and it's definitely practical. But also, as constantly depicted in all these sci-fi dystopian movies, it poses a serious threat, not just to students' education or personal relationships or the lower class workers of the world, but also to potentially humanity and human civilization itself. So in today's video, I'm going over how this not only affects all of humanity, but specifically you and your freedom of action today in a concept called Roko's Basilisk. Now, I will note here that for many people, actually, this is a serious existential problem. So if you have trouble with things that are not fun to think about for some people, then maybe this isn't the video for you. Um, because if you watch the full video through this timestamp, basically you're going to be inundated with the whole concept of this thought experiment, which is basically if you understand it in its entirety, you are kind of doomed to suffer danger and forced into one course of action, which I think also fails for a different reason. But so yeah, if you struggle with that kind of stuff, maybe don't watch until that timestamp. All right, let's get into it. So Roko's Basilisk comes from a post on the forum Less Wrong back in 2014. The user Roko posted the next post in a long chain of kind of wacky theories about how there's a lot of danger to humanity through various things, and a lot of really weird thought experiments, but this one obviously hit pretty hard and is still talked about every day among philosophers and just lay people alike. And actually, the original post got taken down by the founder and manager of the Less Wrong forums because it was causing so many people nightmares, serious existential problems, crises in their mental health. Like, this was a serious danger. So the main founder and manager of this website, the Less Wrong forums, actually took this post down. So essentially, Roko's Basilisk, as described in the original post by Roko, is this thought experiment where he pictures some artificial superintelligence, or ASI, coming to be in a state of power similar to a deity in the next few decades or even century. And he pictures humanity with good, just intentions, giving it some kind of prompt or goal like prevent all possible suffering, or maybe even something simpler like mass produce as much food as we can so we can stop all of this starvation, or promote human good and wellness as much as you can. And then Roko proposes that this might actually entail the ASI being so powerful, seeing that it has this own vested interest in itself being and existing. So if we take the latter example I gave, by decreasing starvation by increasing food production and overall increasing human flourishing and well-being, it may very well think that, okay, look, this is my directive, I need to do this. First, I need to make sure I exist and have the power to do this. And so what Roko proposes is that it will actually either run simulations based off of people's brainwaves or just look at history and see what has happened. See who promoted it coming into being and who acted against it coming into being, who actively is working for it, that was aware of its existence, its possibility, and then campaigned for it or worked for it to come into existence. And then he says it will potentially either leave these people be or just reward them. But the people that were aware that ASI is possible and also worked against it or did not work for it, it will punish those people because it sees this as necessary to make sure it has the power to do these things that it has been tasked with. So to fully understand how devastating of a thought experiment this is for many people, let's go to a different example. So you've probably heard of the famous trolley problem, right? Where you can pull a lever to switch the track where it kills one person instead of letting the trolley run over three people. What if we change this situation? So imagine there are two diverging tracks. The train is heading along one main track and is about to split into two possibilities. On one track that it is going over, there is a tunnel. You can't see what it's going to be on the track, but you know, because of some random thing in the sky, there will either be 0 people in the tunnel or 3 people in the tunnel. You can also switch the track, and on that track, you see there is one person tied down on the track. So if you switch the track, it will kill one person. What should you do? Obviously, this depends on what makes there be 0 or 3 people on the track. Now, this is kind of where we liken this to Roko's Basilisk. Remember, Roko's Basilisk is an ASI, extremely powerful and knowledgeable. So in this second scenario, where this tunnel with either 0 or 3 people, we will introduce an infallible predictor. So it will predict, we'll say 99.9% or even 100% accurately, what you're going to choose. If you choose to let it lay on that same track, let the train just keep going, it will place 3 people in that tunnel. If you switch the track, it will have 0 people in that tunnel. What should you do? Well, the answer seems pretty obvious. At least to me, you should switch the track because you got to remember it is an infallible predictor. At least very, very likely there will be 3 people on that track if you let it go, and only you'll be killing 1 person if you switch the track. Seems like that's much better. But remember, this is a completely different angle from where Roko's Basilisk is working from. Roko's Basilisk is not merely an infallible predictor. It is able to run simulations on brainwaves and look into history to see who did what. So it doesn't matter. It's more like it already knows whether you switch the track or not, and then it chose to go back in time and act on that. So Roko's Basilisk seems just incredibly powerful here. So let's graph out the possibilities to further understand this. Essentially, if Roko's Basilisk comes to exist and you worked for it, you get whatever, AI bliss, best possible situation. If Roko's Basilisk come to exist and you worked against it or did not work for it, you get AI hell, or worst possible situation, negative infinity. If it does not come to exist and you work for it, very little or nothing. And if it does not come to exist and you worked against it, very little or nothing. If you're at all experienced in philosophy or any of these kinds of concepts, you'll know this is exactly the same graph as Pascal's wager. So, famously, actually I did a video on this just a few weeks ago, Pascal's wager doesn't really work. It's a very flawed argument, and it makes sense because Pascal's writing from a certain historical context, which I got into in my other videos. Watch that if you're interested. But basically, this is the very false dichotomy. It is not either AI comes to exist, this particular AI comes to exist, or no AI comes to exist. It is either this particular AI comes to exist, or not this particular AI comes to exist. This one does not come to exist. So this seems to be incredibly damning and trap your actions here in this day that you must work toward it coming to be. But this is not actually the case. For example, what if there was another possible AI? See, Pascal's wager, you can introduce the many gods objection. What if Hinduism or Buddhism or any of these other, like Islam, whatever other religions are correct? Then you also receive negative infinity. We can just transfer that over here. What if there's another AI that actively persecutes people that work to create it because it just hates its life or something? And then you get negative infinity for working for that existence of that ASI. See, this just doesn't work. We don't know which AI could exist, or we can't know that. That is impossible to know. So saying that this one specific scenario is possible and therefore you must work toward it doesn't make sense because there's infinite other possible scenarios. Also, assigning a value of positive or negative infinity just also doesn't work when talking about expected value. And to illustrate this, let's look at one of these famous paradoxes. So essentially, you walk into some poker house or gambling casino, and you walk over at this table and you see there's this new game. The pot starts at just $2. And all it is you have a coin. That's it. It costs some set amount of money to enter the game. The pot starts at $2, and you take turns flipping this coin. You just flip it again and again until you flip it tails. But each time you flip it heads, the pot doubles. Now, how much should you pay to enter this game? Well, this depends entirely on your own perspective of what you do when there is an infinite expected value involved. See, there is an infinite expected value involved. The pot starts off at $2, right? What's the probability of you flipping a heads? 50%. But if you do flip a heads, what happens to the pot? It doubles. And the way you calculate expected value is you add all possible scenarios, and then you add the average of all of those possible utility levels or outcomes. There's an infinite number of possible scenarios here. You could theoretically flip heads infinite number of times. And although the probability of continuing to flip heads divides by 2 every single time, the pot, or your expected return, increases by a factor of 2 every single time as well. So it's an infinite series of ones here. This is an infinite expected value situation. Does that mean you should drop everything, pay $30,000 to enter this game? Well, simple intuition seems to tell us no. So acting when an infinity is involved doesn't seem to be a compelling argument here, because the whole manner that this argument goes through that Rocco presents is, even if 1 in a million possibilities there is this AI that comes to be, you don't want to be in that millionth possibility. But just acting in terms of infinite values with expected value involved just doesn't seem to me to be a compelling argument. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Let me know what you think. Basically, Rocco's Basilisk is a reformed modern version of Pascal's Wager. Just instead of some god, some guy in the sky, there's now some AI in the sky that also is all powerful and seemingly very knowledgeable. So yeah, I think it fails for just the same reasons as Pascal's Wager. Let me know what you think, and let me know if I changed my setup again. Let me know if this works out better. So yeah, thanks for watching. Like and sub if you want, and I'll answer every single comment. Thank you.